humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, if you're lucky enough to be doing it too. Today's class will be on stuff to do with tanks, important tanking stuff to do with important tanking business. You might hear a few voices in the background, a bit of clamour and commotion, because basically today is a public holiday in Australia, and it's only because I love you all so much that we're doing a video. And my gorgeous young lady, who is the belle of the ball, is currently preparing to go out to a mate's place for a barbecue. Junior's running around like a loose cannon, so it's all happening here. Now, this video is about really the provisions, the rations, what they do to the tank, how they move it around, and why we use them. And it's a bit of a conversation that I had with the well-known Irish coffee baron, Positive Waves, who was saying how he now runs double fuel on his ST1 and his grill because he finds them to be far more mobile. And I said, no, that's ridiculous. You've got to run double rations for your gun handling and all that. And I did some testing with Hoodie, my good mate Hoodie from the Grump Clan. And gee, we came up with some very, very interesting results. And we're going to get to those later. So we're going to talk about the rations. I'd also like to say not happy Anzac Day, but I hope everyone's having a good Anzac Day, enjoying themselves, and remembering the reason why we have Anzac Day in the first place here in Australia. So this is the ST1. It's a very, very tough tank. It's a brilliant tank. It's a brutally effective heavy. It's just rough and tough. And you can see this game here, I've taken a heap of damage from everyone involved. I've held a flank against just about their entire team, and the rest of my team has come around and will clean them up, and we lose one tank in the game, and that's me, and sometimes that's a good thing. Now, that's one of the things. I started playing this tank again. I love it. Great tank. And we decided to try some things out. So firstly, I wanted to test the influence of double fuel and one big ration versus just double rations. So that's what we're going to do here, and I'm going to do it with my good mate Hoodie. Now, we're in the ST1s, and we're on Black Goldville. For the purposes of this testing, we're going to run all Black Goldville all day, all night. Now, Hoodie is on the right with 2 times normal rations and 1 times of fuel. I've got 2 times of fuel and 1 times a big ration. And you'd think that running 10% plus 3% would give you a little bit more of a nudge, and it does give you a tiny little bit of a nudge, but that's all. 3% isn't very, very much at all. And double rations, well, I mean, you can see there, it doesn't really you get like an extra meter. What about going up hills? Maybe it makes a difference going up the hills. It doesn't really. It makes a tiny, sneaky, tiny little bit of smidgen of difference. Tiny. Next to no difference. And this is the difference between 2 times fuel rations and 2 times rations. And what about in Traverse? Well, not surprisingly, there is bugger all difference in the Traverse. And I found this regardless of the combos that were used. There just was next to no difference in the actual Traverse time it took an ST1 to get around, whatever you were running. And here's the thing. Your Traverse numbers are there in the game for you to see. With 2 rations, you have 23.53. With 2 fuels, you have 24.73 degrees of Traverse per second. If you add in a big fuel or a big ration to one of those things, you get 25.413 for the 2 rations and 1 big fuel, and 25.49 for the 2 fuels and 1 big ration. This is like 0.3 degrees per second of Traverse, and it takes you like, I don't know, 18 seconds to traverse, so it should make a big difference, but it really doesn't. It makes like 6 degrees worth of traverse over 20 seconds, which is next to nothing. But look at the difference when you run no fuel at all. So what you're seeing here is a really big difference between running no fuel at all. But when you run no fuel at all and just run double rations, the traverse numbers, even though they're different, they're not that amazing. Like, not huge at all. So what does that tell you? Well, I'll get to the conclusions in just a wee bit. What we then did was something very, very different, which is not really going to be something we can put our house on, because I can't tell you what's coming up with the new equipment update. But no one uses improved suspension. Nobody uses improved suspension because, gee, the other stuff is just so bloody good. And it is. All these, by the way, are with running vents. All these have the same equipment loadouts. Vents, rammer, vertical stabilizer, or gun lane drive, etc. And we did do some testing to make sure that it wasn't weight-based. And we'll get to that in just a second. Hoodie and I are both running the same rations now. Double rations. Both with double fuel. Left tank has enhanced suspension. Jeez, it gets confusing. And you can see that the actual tank on the left starts to move along quite a bit quicker, which is interesting because that's with enhanced suspension. So we decided to run it on a much rougher bit of terrain, and Hoodie actually starts slightly ahead of me here. He's on the left-hand side. Oh, whoops, hang on. We went a little bit early there. Bit of a false start. Bit of a premature start. There we go. Hoodie starts slightly ahead. Look at the way on rougher terrain the enhanced suspension works out. It really gets moving and does give you an advantage. But of course, the thing is, you've got to drop either vents, gun rammer, or vertical stabilizer for that advantage. And it's not really worth that. We did test it to make sure because the enhanced suspension weighs nothing. Weighs nothing, and the thing it replaced the rammer weighed 400 kilos. But so we ran it different. There was no difference. 400 kilos doesn't seem to make a whole hell of a lot of difference with these tanks, and it wouldn't because they're huge. And even with enhanced suspension, it didn't do bugger all for the Traverse. You can see here, absolutely bog all for the Traverse numbers, which again is no huge surprise. Traverse of all the stats seems to be very, very much the least affected. And then we thought we'd try it with a super heavy tank. So we grabbed two E100s, which is fair enough. E100, massive, big, heavy tank. And I think this is one of the things that we really haven't tested yet, but which I think really shines here, is that the big tanks, the really heavy tanks, don't get a lot of joy out of this. And I might put a little bit more effort into it and maybe test it with some of the super lights. But look, every tank we've seen has the same kind of result so far. The extra little bit doesn't seem to help. The extra 3% does next to nothing. And Hoodie is running double rations, one big ration of fuel, and I'm running double fuel rations, one big ration. And you can see it's like 3% is literally what you're getting. And in terms of Traverse, again, absolutely no difference. So what is the end result here? Well, firstly, it was interesting to see that the enhanced suspension did in fact give you a bit of a hand in terms of speed, but again, didn't seem to really help in terms of Traverse. I've actually had a bit of a come to Jesus moment with this one. I think from here on in, I'm not going to run double rations. I'm not going to run double fuel. And I think both the Irish Coffee Baron and myself were pretty much incorrect. The benefit from the 3% you get as a second ration or a second fuel is so marginal, not just on engine performance and mobility, but also on gun handling and view range, that I'm going to run 3 of the bigs. I'm going to run the big chocolate ration or the big ration, the big improved fuel, and the protective kit. Because I would rather have the 15% of protection from crew injuries, the 10% to module repair, and especially these two, the 20% fire protection and the 10% to ammo rack damage, to ammo rack durability. Those two things are really, really important, I think, and outweigh the benefit of, say, getting, if you ran chocolate rations, you'd get an extra 4.1 meters of view range, you get an extra 0.003 dispersion and a 0.08 rate of fire. And I've always just been very gung-ho about this and believed that it was double rations, and one big fuel all the way. And when someone challenged me on it, which was good, and this is why debate is great, I was all the way against it. And it turns out I was wrong. but I also think the Irish coffee baron was wrong. And I am changing the way I move, and you may want to try this as well and run a protective kit as well as the other big two. So that's today's video, and I hope that was a little bit interesting for you guys. It was certainly very interesting and an eye-opener for me. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Love you all. Have a happy Anzac Day and a safe Anzac Day, and look after your families and your friends. Days like this absolutely remind us of just how important life is. Until next time, stay safe on the battlefield.